Let's bring in Dr. Alan Mendoza now. He's Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society and joins us. A good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Who do you believe?
Well, on the balance of probability, on the balance of evidence I've seen, which includes, by the way, mapping evidence by a group of independent experts who track missile launches on a regular basis, it appears, can't be 100% verified, but it does appear that the Islamic Jihad theory that it was a misfired Palestinian rocket does look more likely than it was an Israeli rocket. There's been no evidence suggested or presented at all that it's been an Israeli rocket other than Israel's firing rockets, whereas there is considerable evidence that has been presented, including the corroborating evidence that was mentioned about the phone conversation, that this may well have been a Palestinian rocket gone wrong. So on balance, I'm on that side. But of course, I do stress the fog of war and we need final verification. But what with the facts that we know, and you've seen Joe Biden's come to the same conclusion, I believe HMG is essentially on the same wavelength as well. I think it's most likely a Palestinian rocket.
Okay. And in terms of how this sort of has derailed any attempts by, Joe Biden to meet, be seen to meeting Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu, and then also Arab leaders in Jordan, that of course has been derailed, which of course probably what the Islamic Jihadi group in Gaza would have wanted if this had been a deliberate attack, because as we know, one of the things that was coming down the line very soon was a sort of basically a rapprochement between Saudis and Israel, and again that's been derailed. We talk about how everyone wants peace, but Hamas doesn't want peace, Hezbollah don't want peace, Iran don't want peace. They are upping the ante now as well. There are a lot of groups, even countries in this region, who actually don't have an interest in peace at all, do they?
No, indeed, and you've highlighted all of them there in one fell swoop. The reality is that Hamas is a genocidal terrorist movement with Islamist political beliefs that has no interest in peace with Israel, or for that matter, peace with its Palestinian brothers in Fatah, or peace of any kind. You've highlighted Hezbollah, the Shiite terrorist movement in Lebanon, which is, of course, like Hamas, backed by Iran. Again, no interest in peace. What it wants to do is serve Iran's interest. And Iran's interest is very much to stir up trouble in the region, to deflect against what is happening in Iran, where the protests against the mullah's rule continues, and to try and disrupt any moves towards peace by its so-called enemies, because it is, of course, worried that if Israel, for example, gets together with Saudi Arabia, the Arab world normalizes with Israel, then everyone will quite rightly look around and go, well, where's the source of instability? It is Iran.
And this is one of the big issues, isn't it? Now, we've had the MI5 chief as well, speaking with other Five Eyes allies or intelligence allies, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, some of the world's leading intelligence sources, although missed out on the 7th of October attack. Certainly there's some failings there. But he's been warning of the terror that we're seeing over in the Middle East coming to Europe. We've already seen an attack on a synagogue in Berlin. We've seen a French teacher beheaded. We've seen an attack on, well, it was actually a Jewish attack on a Palestinian boy in New York. We've seen 6 airports in France having to evacuate over terror threats there today as well. Big concerns about what happens on the streets of the UK too.
Yeah, totally. I think what you're seeing is a rise of radicalism, a rise of radicalization, and an incentive for people now to throw in their lot with what's happening in the Middle East. It tends to be one-way traffic, I think you'll find, when it comes to the actual atrocities being carried out. It's people who share, if you like, the ideological and religious beliefs of Hamas. So we're talking about the jihadist movements, if you were, and their adherents. They are the ones who are quite clearly of most concern to Europe right now. That's why there are security alerts across Europe. It's not because they're worried about Jews being violent. They're worried about radical Muslims being violent. And that's indeed what's been happening elsewhere. And we have to be careful in the UK as well. There's a lot of preventative action going on behind the scenes. There are efforts to make sure that sort of marches and protests do not turn violent, and that there is sufficient protection being given to the likely victims of any violence in the UK, which would be the Jewish community, given the rise of anti-Semitism already. And as a result, we have to be on our guard to make sure that there is no extremism allowed, and that public order is maintained. Because if public order is removed for one group of people in the UK, then it frankly is removed for all of us.
Yeah, indeed. And we have to remember, there are still some ongoing issues in this country. We've seen sort of, we've still got a teacher, by the way, in Batley, from Batley Grammar School, who's in hiding after being threatened with death after simply showing a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. We've got these sort of issues. We kind of think it's all over there, it's happening over there, it's not happening here. It is happening here. It's just a lot of the media just choose to ignore it a lot of the time and make excuses. Another person arrested who apparently has got a mental health problem. And we just try and ignore it and brush it under the carpet, don't we?
Well, I think it's very difficult to ignore if you're walking through any of our major cities. Over the past week, angry crowds shouting Allahu Akbar in many cases and Intifada, Intifada. That is not something ordinary British people can ignore, and they know it. And even if the media, the mainstream media, chooses to ignore it, anyone who sees it and witnesses it is no doubt going to be worried. I mean, I'm a local councillor in London, and I get a full postbag from people of all backgrounds who are concerned about what they're terming the public disturbances in London over the past week and a half. There's concern, and the government is doing its best, I think, to get on it. I think the other parties are also supporting the idea that we have to maintain cohesion, but we need action from the police to make sure that extremism is clamped down on, and if people are breaking the law or look to be doing that, then they need to be taken aside, arrested, and taken out of the equation.